The applause was deafening, echoing across the grand ballroom of the Grand Hyatt in Midtown Manhattan. Under the brilliant glow of the crystal chandeliers, everything shimmered as though lifted from a dream. I stood beside my husband, Marcus Holloway, co-founder of the software company Innovatech, accepting the flood of congratulations with a poised smile. Today marked two milestones: the 5th anniversary of the company's founding and the official announcement that Innovatech had finally achieved a valuation of $1 billion. It was the culmination of the blood, sweat, tears, and youth that our marriage had invested to reach this summit. I was wearing a jade green silk gown, my hair swept up in an elegant bun, and subtle yet striking makeup. A sense of fulfillment, difficult to express in words, swelled in my chest. I remembered the day I decided to abandon a promising career path in Boston and move back to the States. All my friends told me I was crazy, but I simply smiled. Here was Marcus, the man I had loved since our college days, and with whom I believed I would spend the rest of my life. Together, we had written the very first line of code, stayed up night after night to finish projects, and shared the little money we had, leaning on each other. Innovatech was our spiritual child, the living testament to our love and sacrifice. Marcus, looking incredibly handsome in his impeccably tailored suit, ascended the stage. His voice, warm and self-assured, resonated throughout the room. He spoke of our journey, the countless hardships, and the challenges we overcame. He thanked the partners and employees who had accompanied us. I watched him from below in silence, feeling immense pride. If he was the technical brain, I was the one who managed external relations and crafted the development strategy. We were like two perfectly complementary puzzle pieces, building the sturdy castle that was Innovatech. At that moment, Marcus's voice broke, tinged with a strange emotion. Looking at a distant point, he said, "And today, I want to give the most special thanks to one person, my life partner, who has always been an inexhaustible source of inspiration for me, and the driving force that allowed me to overcome every storm. That person who quietly stood by my side gave me the power to turn the wildest ideas into reality." The room held its breath. Without realizing it, a happy smile spread across my face. I thought he was speaking about me. Hadn't I been that person for all these years? I prepared to join him on stage to share that moment of glory. But Marcus wasn't looking at me. His gaze was fixed on a corner of the stage. "Chelsea, over here, please." It was a tender voice I had never heard him use before. A young woman emerged from behind the stage. It was Chelsea Vance, a new employee who had joined the marketing team just over a year ago. She wore a loose-fitting white maternity dress that couldn't quite conceal her visibly bulging belly. There was shyness on her face, but an undeniable pride shone in her eyes. When she approached Marcus, my husband effortlessly extended his hand to help her with astounding naturalness, a tender and intimate gesture. He handed her a bouquet of red roses, my favorite flowers. Time seemed to stop. The soft background music suddenly became a jarring screech, and a murmur began to spread. At first they were whispers, but they soon grew into an uncontrollable buzz, like a swarm of angry wasps. Hundreds of eyes locked onto me, looks of curiosity, pity, and, most crushingly, compassion. Those stares hurt more than 1,000 insults. I felt my cheeks burn, my throat dry, and the smile freeze on my lips. There I stood, at the center of all the attention, transformed not into the protagonist of my glorious celebration, but into the most miserable spectacle. Marcus didn't need to say anything else. His gesture, Chelsea's pregnant belly, it was all a blatant declaration. In front of everyone, he had proclaimed their relationship, his betrayal, and my public humiliation. At the precise moment our spiritual child was spreading its wings to fly, the family I had built with all my heart shattered before my eyes. The first feeling that overcame me wasn't pain, but an emptiness that chilled my body. All the sounds around me faded, and I only clearly saw the image of Marcus and Chelsea together under the stage lights. They made a beautiful couple, the successful entrepreneur and the young, lovely woman carrying his child, and I, the wife who had spent the most difficult years with him, had instantly become an old, bothersome obstacle, a shadow. The murmuring grew louder. Poor Alexa. How awful. Who would have thought? So that's what this was. Snippets of sentences that reached my ears stabbed my pride like daggers. At the head table, Marcus's mother, Vivian Holloway, watched me with a mix of satisfaction and disdain. She had never liked me, always complaining that I was too strong and dominated her son. She must have been immensely satisfied right then. I took a deep breath and straightened my back. I couldn't break down. Not here. Not now. I was Alexa Thornton, the daughter of the great Eleanor Thornton, a woman who never learned to bow her head to any adversity. I gripped my clutch bag tightly. The physical pain of my nails digging into my palm helped me regain my composure. I stared directly at the stage toward Marcus, who was trying to avoid my gaze, and then I did something no one expected. I walked slowly toward the stage. My steps were firm, without a hint of hesitation. A strange silence fell over the ballroom as the silk of my dress brushed the floor. Everyone held their breath, watching to see what I would do. Marcus and Chelsea were visibly disconcerted. My mother-in-law frowned with caution. I stepped onto the platform and positioned myself right next to Marcus. Then I took the microphone from the stunned presenter's hand, turned to the guests, and offered a serene smile, a smile I never thought I could muster at a moment like this. "Good evening, distinguished guests." My voice sounded clear and calm. "I am Alexa Thornton, wife of President Marcus Holloway and co-founder and majority shareholder of Innovatech." I paused, slowly sweeping my gaze across the room. I saw the astonishment clearly in their eyes. I would like to express my most sincere gratitude to all our partners and esteemed guests who are joining us today to celebrate our success. Innovatech's triumph has been possible thanks to all of your trust and support. I turned toward Marcus, who was pale and rigid. I also want to thank my husband for his moving speech. He has always been a talented and passionate man. Then my gaze shifted to the investors, especially those from Phoenix Capital Group, led by my mother, Eleanor Thornton. My voice became firm. However, in light of recent events, as the majority shareholder and the head of the company's development strategy, I believe the time has come to seriously reevaluate the management ethics of our executive leadership. A heavy silence crushed the ballroom. Then I continued, emphasizing every word. Therefore, I will be officially requesting my mother, the president of Phoenix Capital Group, Ms. Eleanor Thornton, to provisionally suspend all plans for additional investment in Innovatech. We need time to conduct a complete reevaluation because if a company desires sustainable growth, its moral foundation must be the foremost value to consider. Finishing, I set the microphone down in silence. I offered a final bow to the guests and walked off the stage with my head held high. I felt Marcus's stunned gaze, my mother-in-law's face blue with rage, and Chelsea's lost expression as she understood nothing. His glorious party had been utterly shattered. I didn't scream or make a scene. I simply used my position to return the humiliation they had inflicted on me. That was the counterattack of a woman who refuses to let anyone trample her dignity. I left the hotel without looking back. I didn't want to see the chaos I had left in my wake. I only wanted to escape that suffocating space, the curious stares, and the whispers. I drove myself. My hands, gripping the steering wheel, were white with tension. The tears I had held back all night finally erupted, streaming down my cheeks. But they weren't tears of weakness. They were tears of injustice and pain. I didn't go to the house I had shared with Marcus. That place had become a strange, alien space. I drove directly to my mother's estate, the only place in the world where, no matter how broken or defeated I was, I would always be welcome. My mother's mansion stood in a tranquil garden, far from the city noise. As soon as she saw my car, the butler rushed to open the door. My mother, President Eleanor Thornton, seemed to have been waiting for me. She stood at the doorway. Despite her slight figure, she exuded imposing dignity. Without asking anything, she simply embraced me. "You're home now. That's all that matters, my child," she said in a warm voice, patting my back softly. One hug, a simple sentence from my mother, and all my barriers crumbled. I cried like a child, releasing all the pain and bitterness I had suppressed. My mother let me cry as long as I needed, gently stroking my hair. She knew I needed that moment. When I finally calmed down, she led me to the living room and served me a cup of hot chamomile tea. "You handled yourself well," my mother said, with a look that blended passion and pride. "They told me everything. The way you behaved on that stage was admirable. You didn't let them humiliate you." "But Mom, it hurts so much," I whimpered. "I don't understand why he did this to me. 10 years of a relationship, 5 years building a company together. Was all that worth less than a woman he's known for barely a year?" My mother sighed and took my hand. "My child, when a man's heart changes, he becomes that cruel. It's not your fault. You did everything you could as a wife. You simply put your trust in the wrong place. But don't worry, Mom is here. Even if the sky falls, together we will overcome it." My mother's resolve was like a balm that gradually calmed my troubled heart. We sat in silence, but I felt a deep bond between us. My mother was not just a mother. She was my friend, my mentor, and the most solid pillar in my life. Just then, the doorbell rang. It was Elijah, my loyal assistant. He had been with me since the company's early days and was the person I trusted the most. His face was etched with worry. "Miss Thornton, you wouldn't answer your phone, so I came straight here," Elijah said urgently. "I apologize for intruding, but there's something important I need to inform you of immediately." "What is it?" I asked, invaded by a bad feeling. Elijah opened his briefcase and pulled out a stack of papers. "Ma'am, there have been many strange movements in the company's cash flow lately. Several large sums were paid to a company called Advanced Management Solutions, LLC. I investigated, and it turns out the director is none other than Mr. Holloway's mother's cousin." My mother and I exchanged horrified glances. Elijah continued in a worried tone. "It looks like they are creating phantom contracts to divert funds from Innovatech. The amounts are not small, ma'am. And I also discovered that Mr. Holloway met with his personal lawyer several times last month." Every word from Elijah was like a hammer blow to my head. This betrayal was far crueler than I had ever imagined. Marcus wasn't just being unfaithful, he and his mother were conspiring to take the entire company and leave me empty-handed on the street. The party that night wasn't just a spectacle to introduce his mistress, it was the starting signal for a meticulously prepared plan. When Elijah finished speaking, a profound silence settled in the room, broken only by the rhythmic tick-tock of the wall clock. My mother seemed shocked for a moment, but she soon regained the composure of an experienced businesswoman. She took the papers from Elijah's hand, put on her reading glasses, and began to examine them page by page. "Marcus and that woman," my mother said with a glacial voice, grinding her teeth. "They have crossed a line they shouldn't have." I sat there, feeling as if I were falling into a bottomless abyss. Before the wound of emotional betrayal could even begin to heal, it was overlaid by the pain of being defrauded in the business to which I had dedicated all my passion. I thought Marcus had simply had a change of heart, that he was temporarily blinded by a new thing. But no, this was a calculated conspiracy. They wanted to snatch everything from me, not just my husband and my home, but also my hard work, my intelligence, and my honor. Elijah continued to report on what he had secretly investigated. Advanced Management Solutions, LLC, was a shell company with no real commercial activity. The consulting contracts Innovatech had signed with it were all rigged, and the clauses were deliberately ambiguous. In the last 3 months, the amount transferred already amounted to tens of millions of dollars. And that's not all, ma'am. Elijah hesitated for a moment before pulling another paper from his briefcase. This is a draft of the divorce agreement I happened to see on Mr. Holloway's lawyer's office computer when I went to pick up some documents. I took a picture of it. With trembling hands, I took the paper. It was a unilateral divorce agreement. In it, Marcus blamed me for everything. It claimed I had focused only on the business, neglecting the home and failing to fulfill my duties as a wife. But the cruelest part concerned the division of assets. All shares of Innovatech would belong to him, arguing he was the primary founder and had contributed the key technology. And I would have to assume all the company's debts, including the phantom debts they had created through their consulting firm. If I signed that document, I would not only be ruined, but would end up with a massive debt. I let out a harsh, bitter laugh. So, years of marriage were finally valued at one sheet of paper filled with malice and betrayal. In the eyes of Marcus and his mother, I had been nothing more than a tool, a stepping stone to reach the peak of glory. And once they had achieved their goal, they were ready to discard me without the slightest hesitation. They are even trying to erase any trace of your contribution to the company's technological foundation, Elijah added, indignant. They've hired another team to rewrite some important modules so they can prove the idea was solely Mr. Holloway's from the beginning. Hearing that, I could no longer cry. The pain transformed into a silent flame of rage burning in my chest. That technological foundation was my life's work. The idea of a smart, flexible enterprise management system was mine. It was born from my experience working in Boston. Marcus was only the one who technically implemented it, and now he intended to steal all the credit. My mother slammed the pile of documents onto the table. "Enough," she said firmly. "We cannot stand idly by while they do this to us. Alexa, you have to get up and fight, not to cling to a worthless man, but to defend your honor and what belongs to you. I will be by your side." My mother's determined gaze infused me with immense strength. Yes, I couldn't collapse. I had to fight for myself, for the years of youth I had sacrificed, and to make those traitors pay for their actions. This battle wouldn't be easy, but I knew I wasn't alone. I had my mother, I had Elijah, and the truth was on my side. The very next morning, we didn't waste a minute. My mother called an old family friend, attorney Roberta Robbie Caldwell. She wasn't one of those high-profile lawyers featured in the press, but in the legal world, she was respected for her integrity and vast experience in complex economic litigation. Her office, far from the ostentation of large law firms, was in a quiet, discreet building in Georgetown, D.C. Attorney Caldwell was a woman in her 60s with gray hair pulled into an impeccable bun and an intelligent gaze behind her glasses. She received us with chamomile tea. As I explained everything, from the theater of the party to the evidence Elijah had gathered, she listened in silence, nodding occasionally. When I finished, she finally spoke in a soft but powerful voice. "Alexa, I am so sorry for what you've had to go through, but despite the bad, there is good news. Their haste and brazenness at the party were a fatal mistake. Thanks to that, we've gained time to prepare." She took the photo of the divorce agreement Elijah had secured and read every clause carefully. "A greedy and stupid agreement," she sentenced. "They underestimated you and your mother. They thought that with the psychological pressure of the mistress and the pregnancy, you would break down and sign anything. But they were wrong. Robbie, I entrust this case entirely to you. I cannot let them do this to my daughter," my mother said. The lawyer nodded. "Don't worry, Eleanor. This isn't a simple divorce case. It's a property dispute with indications of fraud and embezzlement. We will not be dragged into the emotional battle of adultery. We'll only use that to prove the irreparable breakdown of the marriage and Marcus's dishonesty. Our focus will be elsewhere." She looked at me intently with her sharp eyes. "Alexa, from now on, we must draw a clear legal strategy. First, we will focus on proving that your contribution to the founding and development of Innovatech was not just financial, but more importantly, intellectual property, the core idea and technology. She continued explaining, "We must gather all the evidence, however small it may seem. Emails exchanging the first ideas, sketches, notes in notebooks, and testimonies from former colleagues who witnessed your work from the beginning. All of that will be our weapons. Second," she raised 2 fingers, "we will attack their embezzlement of funds. The fact that Elijah found that shell company is a major breakthrough. Now we have to dig deeper, track the flow of money. This will prove that Marcus and his mother acted opaquely and deliberately harmed the other shareholders, including you." Listening to Attorney Caldwell's clear and strategic analysis, my confused mind began to clear. I no longer felt lost or alone. I knew I had found the right person to trust. "Understood, attorney." My voice sounded much firmer. "I'll do as you say. I'll search for all my old files." "Good." The lawyer smiled kindly. "Remember that the law is on the side of justice. This fight may be long and exhausting, but if we are persistent and gather enough evidence, justice will prevail. Turn your pain into strength, Alexa." The meeting with Attorney Caldwell gave me new energy. I was no longer the tragic heroine of my own story. I was going to be a warrior fighting to reclaim what was rightfully mine. The first step was to face the past and return to that place that was once my home to find the necessary pieces for the war ahead. 2 days after meeting with Attorney Caldwell, I decided to go back to the house I had called home with Marcus. My heart was heavy, filled with conflicting emotions. This place held the memories of 10 years of love and married life. Every corner, every piece of furniture, I had chosen and placed myself. I thought I would live here my whole life, that I would grow old with Marcus in our small garden. But now, every step I took in that house was painful and bitter, like walking on broken glass. I deliberately chose a time around noon when I knew Marcus would be at the office. I didn't want to run into him. I just wanted to quietly gather my things and leave. I went straight to the study we shared, where I kept the most important documents. The room was still tidy, but the air felt strangely cold. The photo of our wedding on the desk suddenly felt like a cruel mockery. I started searching. I rummaged through old files, opened dusty boxes on top of the cabinets, and finally found it. An old brown leather-bound notebook stored in a wooden box. It was the notebook I used when I was in Boston, where I had jotted down spontaneous ideas, the first sketches of an innovative enterprise management software. The pages were yellowed and my handwriting had faded in some places, but the diagrams of the system architecture and the notes on the key algorithms were still clear. This was the soul of Innovatech, the irrefutable proof of my contribution. With the notebook in my hands, I felt some of the strength I had lost return. I carefully stored the notebook and several flash drives with related material in my purse. Just as I was about to leave, the door burst open. Marcus was there, paralyzed when he saw me. He probably hadn't expected my return. "What are you doing here?" he asked, his voice slightly wary. "I came to pick up my things," I replied calmly, trying not to show any emotion. Marcus looked at the purse I was carrying, and a shadow of unease crossed his eyes. He entered the room and closed the door forcefully. "Alexa, we need to talk. Please, don't complicate things further. The incident at the party was a mistake, but you shouldn't have acted that way either. Do you know the damage you've done to the company?" I let out a cold laugh. "I damaged the company? And were you thinking about the company when you were planning with your mother to siphon off its funds? Were you thinking about our years together, about my effort when you prepared a divorce agreement to leave me ruined and burdened with debt?" Marcus's face changed. He hadn't imagined I knew all that. "What nonsense are you talking about? Who told you that?" "It doesn't matter who told me. The important thing is that it's true. Marcus, stop pretending. I'm tired too." I looked him straight in the eyes. In those eyes I once loved so much, I now only saw lies and calculation. I loved you and trusted you unconditionally. I gave up everything to come back here and build a business with you. And how did you repay me? With betrayal and a cruel conspiracy. Marcus, disconcerted, approached and tried to take my hand. "Alexa, listen to me. It's not how you think. The thing with Chelsea was a mistake. I still love you. We can start over. Withdraw the petition you made to the investment group. Let's not throw away all our hard work." I slapped his hand away and took a step back. His words now only filled me with disgust. Start over? Marcus, do you take me for a fool? Is your love that cheap? And what about the child that woman is carrying in her womb? What are you going to do with him? Or is everything just a mistake for you, which you can easily discard when things turn against you? I haven't come today to listen to your excuses or to beg you, I stated firmly. I have come to take back what is mine and to let you know that I will never sign any unjust divorce agreement. I will fight to the end to defend my honor and my work in Innovatech. Since you and your mother started this, be prepared to face the consequences. Having said this, I didn't give him a chance to reply. I turned around, opened the door, and walked out. I heard Marcus yelling my name behind me, but I didn't stop. This confrontation served to completely sever the last shred of feeling I had left. There was no more love, no more hope. There was only one path ahead, the path to claim justice. As I left that house, I felt much lighter. The confrontation with Marcus had been painful but necessary. It helped me completely break with the past and focus on the future. There was no more time for sadness. The evidence I had found was a good start. But as Attorney Caldwell had said, the war would be long and arduous. In the following days, Elijah and I worked tirelessly. We systematically organized the information and searched for more witnesses who could corroborate my role in the early days of Innovatech. However, I soon realized that focusing solely on recovering what I had lost at Innovatech was a passive struggle. Marcus and his mother still controlled the management and could sabotage me in 1,000 ways. I needed something of my own, a solid foundation on which I could stand firm, regardless of the outcome of the litigation. The idea of founding a new company began to germinate in my mind, not for revenge or to directly compete with Innovatech, but to prove my own worth. I wanted to show everyone that without Marcus, without Innovatech, this Alexa Thornton could still create an excellent, even superior, technological product. I trusted I could rebuild a much better and more modern version of the technological foundation I had created for Innovatech. I told my mother the idea. After a moment of thought, she gave me her unconditional support. "That's how it's done, my child. That's the way someone with guts acts. Instead of fighting to recover an old house, build your own new castle. You just worry about the work. I'll handle the capital." My mother's support was my greatest strength. But I knew ideas and capital weren't enough. I needed partners, technical talent. Then I thought of Devin. Devin Hayes had been a college friend of both Marcus and me. The three of us used to hang out together. Devin was kind, studious, and very smart. But unlike the outgoing and sociable Marcus, he was quite reserved. I knew he liked me, but he never expressed it in words. He simply looked out for me in silence. After graduation, Marcus and I started dating, and Devin went abroad for studies and worked internationally. A few years ago, I heard he had returned to the States and become a well-known venture capitalist in the tech sector. I hesitated for a moment, but decided to call Devin. It was a bit awkward reaching out after so much time, but his warm and familiar voice on the other end of the phone dispelled all my concerns. "Alexa, how long has it been? How are you?" "Good, I'm good." "Devin, am I bothering you?" "Bothering me? Not at all. I'm really glad you called. But is something wrong? Your voice doesn't sound great." Devin's sensitivity touched me. I gathered my courage and briefly explained my situation and my plans to found a new company. I didn't exaggerate the pain or complain. I laid everything out calmly, as if it were a business plan. Devin listened in silence until the end. I was prepared for comfort, or in the worst case, pity. But what he said surprised me. "I've been waiting for this day, Alexa. The day you would step out of Innovatech's shadow and shine for yourself." His voice was filled with sincerity. "Your talent is much greater than what you're doing there. I mean it, Alexa," Devin continued. "I've always followed Innovatech's trajectory. I knew its foundation stemmed from an idea of yours. Marcus is an excellent programmer, but you're the one with the strategic vision. The decision to go independent will be the best decision of your life. Tell me what you need. I'll support you, not just as a friend, but also as an investor. I trust you, Alexa." Devon's words were like a rush of cool water that irrigated my parched soul. For the first time since the incident, a man valued me for my talent and my true worth, not through the prism of a betrayed wife. The call with Devon further strengthened my determination. I knew I had found my first ally in the arduous new journey that lay ahead. After the call with Devon, everything moved quickly. Devon was not a man of mere words. He immediately organized a meeting and introduced me to a team of brilliant young engineers recently graduated from a prestigious East Coast tech institute. They were young, full of passion, intelligence, and an ardent desire to participate in a project with a grand vision. When I presented them with my idea for a next-generation, smarter, and more flexible enterprise management platform, applying the latest technologies like artificial intelligence, their eyes lit up. They were fascinated by my vision and by the strength and confidence of a woman who had overcome adversity. After several meetings, we connected. Synergy Tech was born, a name that encompassed all my hopes and determination, the synergy of a new generation of technology. We rented a small, non-luxurious but well-equipped office filled with sunlight. The young team and I worked together day and night. The atmosphere at Synergy Tech was completely different from the last few years at Innovatech. Here, there were no internal struggles or calculations, only a passion for technology and teamwork. I felt as if I had returned to the beginning of my career, but this time I was much more the master of my destiny and stronger. In the midst of this progress, an unexpected visitor found me. It was Chelsea. She arranged to meet me at a quiet coffee shop. She looked much more drawn than when she had appeared spectacularly at the party. Her bulging belly was larger, and her movements seemed heavy. She had lost her former air of smugness and defiance. In its place, there was only a pitiful face with tear-filled eyes. "Alexa," Chelsea began in a trembling voice, "I know I don't have the right to talk to you. I know I did wrong, but please, I beg you. Couldn't you just leave Marcus alone?" I stirred my coffee in silence, waiting to see what kind of performance she was going to put on. Chelsea burst into tears. "Marcus is having a really tough time. Since you announced the withdrawal of the investment, the company is in crisis, and the partners look at us with distrust. His mother pressures him every day. He has lost several pounds. I understand you're angry, but you were a couple for 10 years. Taking things to this extreme is pushing him into an abyss." She stroked her belly and added, "And there's my son. This child is not to blame for anything. I just want my son to be born into a complete family with his father. Please, I beg you, withdraw the lawsuit and don't make this any bigger. We will give you whatever compensation you ask for. I'll tell Marcus. Please, just let it go." Hearing that, an ironic smile escaped me. Who did she take me for? A woman whose silence could be bought with money? She and Marcus had publicly humiliated me and conspired to take everything from me, and now she came to lecture me about justice and an innocent child. I put down my coffee cup and looked her straight in the eyes. "Are you finished?" My voice was so calm that even I was surprised. Chelsea seemed disconcerted by my reaction. "First," I said, emphasizing each word, "the problem between Marcus and me is no longer an emotional matter of a love triangle. It's a matter of illegal business. He and his mother attempted fraud and embezzlement. That is a crime, and crimes must be punished. That has nothing to do with you or your child. Second, do not use your child as a shield. If you really thought about him, you wouldn't have gotten involved in someone else's family to begin with, and you wouldn't have been an accomplice to their wrongdoings. The child is not to blame, but the adults must take responsibility for their actions." And finally, I stood up from my chair. "Go and tell Marcus that I don't need his money. What I need is justice, and I am not going to give up. If you truly want your son to have a father, advise him to face the truth and assume his responsibility before the law. That will be best for the child." Without waiting for her response, I turned and left. I knew that behind my back her pitiful face would have contorted with rage, but I didn't care. On the path I was now walking, there was no room for weakness or useless compassion. The real war had only just begun. A few weeks after the encounter with Chelsea, just as Attorney Caldwell predicted, Marcus counterattacked. But he didn't resort to dialogue or negotiation, but to a much baser and pettier method. One morning, I received a court summons. Marcus, in his capacity as president of Innovatech, had sued me. The multi-page lawsuit claimed with a resounding tone that after leaving the company, I had used key technological secrets of Innovatech to found SynergyTech, thereby causing serious harm to the company. They demanded the immediate cessation of SynergyTech's operations and compensation for damages in an astronomical amount. It was a clear reversal of the burden of proof, an attempt to tarnish my honor and crush my new company before it could take off. When the news broke, the young engineers at SynergyTech couldn't help but be worried. They feared for the company's future and for being entangled in a long and costly lawsuit. I understood their concern, but instead of showing hesitation, I called a meeting with all the staff. "Don't worry," I told everyone in a firm voice. "This is nothing more than a dirty tactic on their part. The technological foundation we are creating at SynergyTech is completely new, based on ideas and architecture much more advanced than Innovatech's. Truth and justice are on our side. What we must do now is focus on our work and develop the best possible product. I will handle all legal matters." My calmness reassured them. I immediately took the lawsuit to Attorney Caldwell's office. Contrary to my worry, she took a quick look at the papers and smiled. "He has dug his own grave," she said. "This is the opportunity we were waiting for. In a situation where we should have sued them, they themselves have created the legal stage for us to present all our evidence, that Marcus, spoiled by his mother, is a complete fool." Under Attorney Caldwell's direction, we quickly prepared the response to the lawsuit. Not only did we refute Marcus's unfounded accusations, but we presented clear evidence demonstrating my authorship. The old notebook I had found became the most important piece of evidence. We photocopied and certified every single page, every architectural diagram, and presented it to the court. The chronology was evident compared to Innovatech's founding date. We also had emails from more than 5 years ago, from the time Marcus and I were exchanging the first ideas. In them, it was clear that I conceived and proposed the main guidelines. Furthermore, Attorney Caldwell contacted 2 engineers who had left Innovatech. They had worked there from the beginning, had seen me spend nights correcting errors with them, and had heard me explain the product vision. At first, they were a bit hesitant, but my sincerity and the lawyer's legal guarantees convinced them to testify. The first conciliation hearing was held in an atmosphere of great tension. Marcus and his lawyer, with a very arrogant attitude, presented documents that supposedly proved the uniqueness of Innovatech's technology. But when Attorney Caldwell began to unveil our evidence one by one, Marcus's face began to change. He was stunned to see the copies of my notebook and turned pale when the lawyer cited the old emails. When the 2 former colleagues appeared, Marcus's confidence completely crumbled. He couldn't answer the judge's questions properly and stammered. Marcus's lawsuit, far from sinking me, became a fatal blow to his reputation and Innovatech's credibility. Rumors began to circulate in the tech sector about his petty lawsuit and his cruel treatment of a co-founder. In the unlisted stock market, Innovatech's shares began to fall. In this silent war, I had overwhelmingly won the first round. The defeat in the defamation lawsuit further enraged Marcus and his mother. They realized they couldn't defeat me legally, so they began to resort to darker and dirtier methods. Their target now was the key links in our evidence gathering, especially the witnesses who knew well about Innovatech's irregularities. Elijah, with his diligence and contacts, located a key figure, Mr. Chen, Innovatech's former chief accountant. Mr. Chen had worked at the company for 3 years and had left suddenly about 6 months ago, just after the suspicious transactions with Advanced Management Solutions LLC began. Elijah was convinced that he had left to avoid getting involved in murky matters and that he possessed important evidence. Convincing Mr. Chen was not easy. He was a middle-aged man of a gentle nature who only wanted to live a quiet life with his wife and his 2 young children. When Elijah went to his house, he initially refused outright, saying he knew nothing. He feared retaliation and worried that his family might suffer harm. "Mr. Elijah, please understand my situation," Mr. Chen said anxiously. "Ms. Holloway is not a person you can mess with. I have a wife and children. I don't want to be involved in this." Knowing we couldn't force him, I asked Elijah to approach him slowly, building a relationship of trust, sometimes as a friend who cared about his well-being. Little by little, thanks to Elijah's sincerity and perhaps his own conscience, Mr. Chen began to leak information. He confirmed that all contracts with Advanced Management Solutions, LLC, had been rigged by Ms. Holloway's order to divert money. He also knew many other cases of tax evasion and inflating expenses in the company. But just when we thought we had convinced Mr. Chen to cooperate, Ms. Holloway acted. She didn't threaten him directly, but used a more subtle method. Mr. Chen's wife, who worked as a teacher at a private school, suddenly began to be harassed by the administration for absurd reasons. Their eldest son, a high school student, was surrounded and provoked one day by bullies on his way home. Fortunately, people nearby intervened in time, and nothing serious happened. These incidents did not have severe consequences, but they were a clear warning. Mr. Chen panicked. He called Elijah, his voice trembling. "Mr. Elijah, please leave my family alone. I cannot help Ms. Thornton anymore. If they want to, I don't know what could happen to my family." When Elijah told me what happened, my heart sank. The rage I felt towards those despicable people was 10 times less than the remorse I felt for Mr. Chen's family. I couldn't endanger an innocent family for my fight. "Let it go, Elijah," I told him. "Let's not pressure him anymore. His family's safety comes first. We will look for another way." Although it was a disappointment, we had no choice but to temporarily abandon that path. Losing a key witness, our investigation seemed to have reached a dead end, and difficulties were piling up. I realized that this fight was much tougher than I had thought. My enemies not only had money and power, but they didn't hesitate to use the cruelest means to achieve their ends. Seeing me somewhat disheartened about Mr. Chen, my mother called me to her study one night. She prepared chrysanthemum tea, and its gentle aroma relaxed me. "What are you thinking about?" she asked tenderly, setting a cup in front of me. "I'm exhausted, Mom. They are too cruel. I don't want innocent people to suffer because of me." My mother sighed and looked out the window at the garden shrouded in darkness. "Child, in business as in life, there is no war without losses, but we have to know our limits. The decision not to pressure Mr. Chen is the right one, but that doesn't mean we give up. To defeat your enemy, you first have to know exactly who he is." My mother looked at me with her deep eyes. "Today I'm going to tell you a story. The history of your ex-mother-in-law, Marcus's mother." I was surprised. My mother had almost never spoken about my in-laws. She only used to say they were a normal family, nothing special. "Actually," my mother began, "I have known Ms. Holloway for a long time, since we were both young and starting out in the business world. Even then, she was beautiful and intelligent, but her intelligence was accompanied by ambition and unscrupulous cruelty." My mother told me that in the past, Ms. Holloway had partnered with a very close friend. Together they set up a small tailoring workshop. But when the business began to prosper, Ms. Holloway concocted a plan to seduce her partner's husband, and at the same time fabricated false evidence to accuse her of embezzlement. In the end, she took over the entire business, and her friend lost everything and ended up on the street. Marcus's father, my mother continued, he was a simple, diligent technician. Ms. Holloway only married him because he had a certain talent that could be useful to her in managing the workshop. He lived his whole life in his wife's shadow, unable to raise his voice, and he died as silently as he lived. Marcus grew up in that environment. Overprotected by his mother, he was instilled only with ideas about money and power. That boy is a copy of his mother. He has some talent, but his nature is weak, greedy, and easily manipulated. Listening to my mother's story, I began to understand everything. I understood why my mother-in-law could act in such a cruel and calculating way. Greed and betrayal ran in her veins, and the man I once loved, Marcus, was nothing more than a product molded by his mother. "And Chelsea?" I asked. My mother took a sip of tea. "That girl, in my opinion, is nothing more than a pawn in Ms. Holloway's hands. She knew Marcus liked women and deliberately steered the girl toward him. Young, obedient, and also capable of giving him a grandchild to continue the lineage. What more perfect tool could there be? She used her to tie Marcus down and used the pregnancy as a weapon to humiliate you. And when she achieves her goal, who knows what that girl's fate will be?" My mother's analysis made me react. I had been too focused on Marcus and Chelsea, forgetting that the true mastermind behind everything was my mother-in-law. She was the brain of the entire conspiracy. Realizing this, I knew I had to change my strategy. My target was not just Marcus, but that cunning woman. This fight was, in reality, a confrontation between her and me. A few days after deciding to leave Mr. Chen alone, something unexpected happened. One afternoon, a messenger delivered a small package to my mother's house. There was no sender, only an address. Inside the box was not a gift, but a black USB flash drive with no mark or label. My mother and I looked at each other suspiciously. I carefully connected the USB drive to my laptop. Several audio files named by date appeared on the screen. I hesitated for a moment and then clicked on the most recent file. A familiar voice played. It was Marcus's mother's voice. "You do what I tell you. Sign the contract, transfer the money, and I will take care of everything. That Alexa doesn't know anything, and Marcus wouldn't dare disobey me." Next, the voice of a man who seemed to be a lawyer was heard. "Ma'am, isn't this too risky? If we are discovered, we could face charges of fraud, embezzlement, and tax evasion." "Every risk has its reward," Ms. Holloway's voice sounded confident. "As soon as we get rid of Alexa, all of Innovatech will be ours. Do you think this money will be a problem then? Don't worry, we will be grateful to you." My mother and I listened, holding our breath. The 5 audio files contained conversations of Ms. Holloway with her lawyer, with the representative of Advanced Management Solutions LLC, and with Marcus. The content revealed their entire conspiracy, from the creation of the shell company and the diversion of funds through false contracts to the plan to take over the company and saddle me with the debts. This was the most conclusive evidence, more valuable than the testimony of dozens of people. "It's Mr. Chen," I said in a low voice. "It has to be him. He can't show his face, but his conscience wouldn't let him stay silent." My mother nodded with gratitude in her eyes. "He is a good man. We owe him." We immediately copied the files in several places and sent a copy to Attorney Caldwell. She said that with this evidence, our victory was almost assured, but the joy was short-lived. That same night, while my mother and I were working late at the Synergy Tech office, the alarm at her house suddenly went off, connecting directly to her cell phone. My mother quickly activated the security cameras. In the blurry night images, 2 dark shadows were seen entering the house through a backyard window. They were searching my mother's study, where we had opened the USB drive that afternoon. We called the police immediately. When we arrived at the house with the police, the 2 intruders had already disappeared. The study was ransacked, with documents scattered everywhere, but fortunately, nothing of value had been taken. "It is clear that their objective wasn't money. They came for the USB drive," my mother said in a low voice. "Ms. Holloway realized about Mr. Chen. She is desperate to eliminate all the evidence. Thankfully, you were prudent, made copies, and brought the original with you." The failed theft attempt clearly demonstrated the panic and desperation of the mother-son duo. They were like cornered beasts, willing to commit any folly. I knew the time for silence was over, and that they would now resort to more dangerous means. I clenched my fists, promising myself to be more cautious and stronger. The fight had entered its most critical phase. The attempted robbery failed, but it set off alarms. The mother-son duo would stop at nothing to destroy the evidence. This fact made me worry even more about Elijah. He had handled the direct investigation, managed a lot of information, and was in the most vulnerable position. I called Elijah and asked him to be very careful. "Don't worry, ma'am," Elijah said with a determined expression. "I know what I'm doing. I'm not afraid of them. What worries me most now is that although the recordings are valuable, their probative force to accuse them of tax evasion is insufficient. We need concrete documents and accounting records." Elijah informed me that he was still in contact with some friends who still worked in Innovatech's accounting department. Ingeniously, he managed remote access to the company's internal server during the nights when system surveillance was lower. For several nights, Elijah barely slept, silently copying and analyzing gigabytes of data, and his perseverance paid off. He discovered a second accounting system cleverly hidden in a hidden partition of the server. This system recorded all of Innovatech's real income and expenses, completely different from the sanitized figures they presented to the IRS. It revealed a systematic tax evasion of tens of millions of dollars over the last 2 years. It was the definitive proof, the knockout blow that could bring the mother-son duo to justice. But just when Elijah found the most crucial evidence, the enemy smelled it too. One night, as Elijah was driving home from work, 2 motorcycles without license plates cut him off, forcing him to stop. 4 menacing-looking men got off and, without a word, dragged him out of the car and gave him a brutal beating. They didn't steal anything. They just smashed his laptop and left him with a threat. "This is just a warning. If you keep sticking your nose where it doesn't belong, your family won't be safe." Elijah was taken to the hospital by a passerby with several fractured ribs and a body covered in bruises. When my mother and I rushed to see him and witnessed his pathetic state, I felt as if my heart was being stabbed. Elijah's wife cried inconsolably by his side. "Miss Thornton," she sobbed, "please, we can't keep doing this. Those people are so evil. We are just employees. How are we going to beat them? I just want my husband to be okay." I took her hand, but I had a lump in my throat and couldn't say anything. I felt terribly guilty. Elijah's loyalty had cost him and his family too high a price. "I'm sorry," was all I could articulate. Elijah, despite the intense pain, tried to sit up. "Don't say that, ma'am. I did it of my own free will. I don't regret it." He turned to his wife and said in a hoarse voice, "Honey, I'm sorry I worried you and the kids, but I can't stand idly by and watch evil prevail out of fear. I do this not just for Miss Thornton, but for justice." Then he looked at me with his still burning eyes. "Ma'am, they didn't get anything. I saved the most important data elsewhere. Don't give up. We're about to win." The next day, I made arrangements for Elijah to temporarily take refuge with his wife and children in his in-laws' town. Seeing his small family scattered further fueled my anger against the mother-son duo. Elijah's sacrifice could not be in vain. I promised myself that I would make those wicked people pay a heavy price for what they had done. Elijah's loyalty was priceless, and I would never betray that trust. Approximately 1 month after Elijah's incident, once he recovered, and the most important evidence was in Attorney Caldwell's hands, I decided the time had come to launch a public attack. I needed to create enough pressure from public opinion and the business world so that the mother-son duo couldn't do anything else. The opportunity came when I was invited to participate in an important economic forum that brought together hundreds of top-tier entrepreneurs and investors from the country. I was sure Marcus would also attend. After the initial commotion, Innovatech had been trying to clean up its image, sponsoring several events and boosting its advertising. At this forum, Marcus was invited as one of the main speakers to talk about innovation in the digital age. It was the perfect opportunity to rip off his mask of hypocrisy. I appeared at the forum with a completely new image. I was no longer the woman hurt by betrayal, but the self-assured businesswoman of Synergy Tech. I wore an elegant white pantsuit and a modern short haircut. My presence immediately attracted everyone's attention. They whispered curiously about the awkward relationship between Marcus and me. Marcus was surprised to see me for a moment, but he quickly regained a false confidence. He even approached me, offering his hand as if for a social greeting. "Long time no see, Alexa. I didn't know you were interested in these forums." "The business world is a small place, President Holloway," I replied with an equally social smile, but without accepting his hand. "I wish you a successful presentation." Marcus's presentation went smoothly. He spoke eloquently of Innovatech's achievements and ambitious future plans, attempting to paint an idyllic picture of the company. He received quite a bit of applause. But the real show hadn't started yet. During the Q&A session, after several routine questions from journalists, I calmly raised my hand to ask for the floor. All eyes in the room instantly turned toward me. The moderator hesitated for a moment, but then gave me the turn. I walked to the center of the aisle, took the microphone, and looked squarely at the stage where Marcus stood with a forced smile. "Good morning, President Holloway," I began in a clear, crisp voice. "I am Alexa Thornton, president of Synergy Tech. First of all, congratulations on your impressive presentation. My question is about transparency in business management, a topic I'm sure is of great interest to all the investors present here." I paused so that everyone's attention reached its peak. According to the financial reports recently published by Innovatech, the company's profit growth rate is very positive. However, expenses for consulting and marketing activities have skyrocketed, representing an unusually high proportion of total revenue. In my experience, this is somewhat anomalous. Could you more clearly explain this cost structure and the actual efficiency of these investments to the investors and partners here? My question was not a direct accusation, but it struck exactly Innovatech's Achilles heel. It sowed great doubt about the veracity of the figures they published. The room grasped the hidden meaning of my question. On stage, Marcus turned pale. He wasn't prepared for this situation. He tried to stammer out some generic answers about long-term investment strategies and brand building, but he couldn't offer a convincing explanation. His nervousness was the most eloquent response. I didn't need to say anything else. I thanked him and quietly returned to my seat. But the impact of my question was enormous. Murmurs erupted throughout the room. Investors looked at each other suspiciously. Journalists began to write frantically. With a single question, I had completely demolished the image Marcus and his mother had so painstakingly built. Innovatech's credibility suffered an irreparable fissure in the sight of the entire business world. The revelation at the Economic Forum was a heavy blow to Innovatech. Investors began to question. The press constantly published speculative articles, and the company's value plummeted. Amidst this chaos, Marcus's mother, Ms. Holloway, knew she couldn't stand idly by. She understood that confronting me directly was disadvantageous now that all the evidence and public opinion were on my side. She decided to play her last card, a malicious psychological attack aimed at the person she considered my weak point, my mother. President Eleanor Thornton. Ms. Holloway personally called my mother and, with a surprisingly polite voice, proposed a private meeting at a traditional tea house to talk like adults. My mother, after consulting with me and Attorney Caldwell, accepted the proposal. She knew it was a trap, but it was also an opportunity for that shrewd old fox to give herself away. The tea house was on a quiet, tucked-away street, a serene space filled with the murmur of water and the soft scent of incense. My mother arrived dressed in an elegant dark velvet pantsuit that emanated depth and serenity. Ms. Holloway was already waiting for her, carefully made up but unable to hide her fatigue and rage. "Eleanor, you came," Ms. Holloway said with a forced smile. "It's been so long since we sat down alone like this." My mother also smiled gently and sat across from her. "Hello, Vivian. I hope it's something important for you to have called me yourself." Ms. Holloway began talking in circles while serving the tea. "It's about the kids. Young people in their impetuousness sometimes do things they shouldn't. It seems to me that Alexa is overdoing it a bit lately. No matter that they were husband and wife, you can't drive a person into a dead end like this. The blow Innovatech suffered from the forum was very big." My mother listened in silence, undisturbed, lifting her teacup. Not getting a reaction, Ms. Holloway began to grow impatient. She put the cup down with a dry thump and her voice sharpened. "Eleanor, let's be honest. Control your daughter. We will amply compensate her with whatever money she wants. If we keep making this bigger, it won't be good for anyone. When the net breaks, the fish dies. Do you understand what I mean?" "No, I don't understand," my mother replied, still in a quiet voice. "My daughter is only trying to recover what is fair. What is wrong with that?" Ms. Holloway laughed with a gaze as sharp as a knife. "Justice! Where is absolute justice in this world? You and I are businesswomen. Don't tell me you don't know. Everyone has something to hide, things they prefer others not to know. Are you sure your Phoenix Capital Group is 100% clean?" She began to show her true colors. "I still remember the real estate project in South Florida 10 years ago. You were also very quick then. Thanks to a few insider tips, you acquired some prime land. If all that came out in the press now, what would your investors think?" It was a blatant threat. She was using past business dealings and complex networks of contacts to pressure my mother into backing down. She thought my mother, like her, would sacrifice her daughter for her own interests. But Ms. Holloway miscalculated. Hearing the threat, my mother didn't flinch. She simply slowly took her phone out of her purse, pressed the stop recording button, and left it on the table. The screen was still on, clearly showing that the recording had been in progress. "Thank you, Vivian," my mother said with a serene but powerful voice. "Our entire conversation, especially that threat you just made, has been recorded. I believe this audio file, along with the other evidence, will help the authorities understand the case more comprehensively." Ms. Holloway's face turned from red to white. She stammered, "How dare you?" "Dare what?" My mother interrupted her. "The deals you mentioned were managed entirely legally. I have nothing to hide. If you want to investigate, go ahead, but your actions today, threatening and intimidating another person, have been clearly recorded. I think the one who should be worried now is you." With that, my mother stood up and adjusted her suit. "The tea was delicious. Thank you for the invitation. I'll take my leave." My mother left with elegance, leaving a petrified and distraught Ms. Holloway in the tea house. She trembled from head to toe with an expression of total disbelief. Her last psychological attack had not only failed, but had turned into a living piece of evidence that incriminated her. The old fox had fallen into her own trap. Ms. Holloway returned home in a state of extreme panic. The meeting with my mother had completely demolished her last bit of confidence and composure. She smashed a tea set on the floor, screaming like a madwoman throughout the house. Marcus, frightened by his mother's state, rushed to ask her, "Mom, what's wrong?" "It's over? Is everything over?" Ms. Holloway shrieked, her hair disheveled. "That woman recorded everything. She set a trap for me. We are finished, son." She told Marcus the whole story. Hearing it, Marcus also froze, his face drained of color. He was aware of their situation, Mr. Chen's audio files, the double accounting Elijah found, and now the recording of his mother threatening President Thornton. All this evidence together was enough for both of them to go to jail. "What do we do, Mom? What if I go see Alexa and beg her forgiveness?" Marcus said in a trembling voice. His innate weakness was resurfacing. "Beg forgiveness?" his mother snapped. "Do you think that will help now? Do you think Alexa and her mother will let us go that easily? You fool, we only have one way out." "Which one?" "Run," Ms. Holloway said, grinding her teeth. "We have to leave here before the police come, sell all the shares, take all the money, and leave the country. With money, you can live anywhere." In their desperation, a plan to divert assets was quickly drawn up. Ms. Holloway contacted several intermediaries through her old business contacts and agreed to quickly sell all of her Innovatech shares at a much lower price than the market value. The transaction had to be fast and in cash. At the same time, Marcus was tasked with withdrawing money from the company's and personal bank accounts and gradually transferring it to offshore accounts through unofficial channels. They moved in secret, terrified. Marcus spent the whole day locked in his room with a haggard face, talking on the phone in whispers. Chelsea, with her already very large belly, noticed the change in Marcus and asked him what was wrong, but she only received irritation and evasiveness. Her female intuition told her something bad was happening. She secretly looked at Marcus's cell phone and was horrified to see a confirmation message for a one-way flight reservation to Europe. The tickets were only for 2 people, Marcus and his mother. Chelsea collapsed. She understood that she and the child she carried were nothing more than pawns that were about to be abandoned. Meanwhile, on our side, all the movements of the mother-son duo were under control. Elijah, from his refuge, continued to closely monitor Innovatech's transactions through trusted friends. Detecting the anomalous sale of a large amount of company shares and the withdrawal of large sums of money from the accounts, Elijah immediately informed me. "Ma'am, I think they are trying to run." Elijah's voice was urgent on the other end of the phone. Hearing the news, I didn't hesitate for a second. I immediately called Attorney Caldwell. "Attorney, I think the time has come." "Understood," the lawyer replied firmly. "Alexa, stay calm. I will go immediately to the authorities with all the documents and evidence we have. The net of justice is wide, and although it seems slow, it never fails. They won't be able to go anywhere." Night fell over the city. In the luxurious mansion, the mother-son duo hurriedly stuffed wads of cash and documents into suitcases to catch a flight before dawn. They had no idea that outside their house, an invisible web of the law had been cast and was closing in, waiting for the opportune moment. That night, the city was drenched in a persistent rain. The rhythmic tapping of the drops on the window sounded like a sad melody announcing the end. Marcus's mansion, despite it being midnight, was fully lit. The air inside was taut as a bowstring. Ms. Holloway kept moving restlessly, urging Marcus, "Hurry up, son. The car to the airport will be here soon." "Is everything ready?" "Yes, Mother," Marcus replied in a weary voice. He had just finished a call with an intermediary who confirmed that the last share sale transaction had been completed and the cash would be delivered at a secret location. Everything seemed to be going according to their desperate plan. They didn't know that Attorney Caldwell had spent the entire afternoon at the U.S. Attorney's office. She had laid out the entire case clearly and logically, from the evidence of my intellectual property to the false contracts, the double accounting, the recordings of the calls, and the audio of Ms. Holloway threatening my mother. The massive, irrefutable set of evidence surprised the investigators. Given the seriousness of the case and the risk of the suspects fleeing, an arrest warrant and an asset seizure order were urgently approved. Just as Marcus and his mother, dragging suitcases full of money and documents, were leaving the door to get into the waiting car, 2 police cars silently pulled up, blocking the exit. The doors opened, and several uniformed officers got out. At the front, an inspector with a serious face. "We are from the FBI's Economic Crimes Division," the inspector said, showing the arrest warrant to the mother-son duo. "Marcus Holloway and Vivian Holloway must accompany us to the station to clarify some matters related to the management of Innovatech." Ms. Holloway froze. The suitcase she was holding fell to the ground, and wads of cash spilled out, scattering across the rain-soaked pavement. Her face turned paper white, and her eyes widened in terror. Her perfect plan had crumbled at the gates of paradise. Marcus trembled from head to toe, and his legs gave out, forcing him to lean against the wall to keep from falling. "There must be some mistake," Ms. Holloway stammered. "We are honest business people. We haven't done anything wrong." The inspector said no more and signaled to his subordinates. The mother-son duo was led to the car, overwhelmed by confusion and helplessness. At the same time, another team entered the house to execute a search and seizure warrant. The entire mansion, as well as the bank accounts, shares, and all assets in Marcus's and Ms. Holloway's names, were frozen. The net of the law had closed without leaving a single loophole. From the second-floor window, Chelsea saw everything. She hugged her belly and cried inconsolably. There was no place for her or her son in Marcus and his mother's escape plan. She had been discarded like a useless object. Now, seeing the man she once loved and the woman she feared being taken away by the police, Chelsea felt only an infinite emptiness and despair. When Attorney Caldwell gave me the news, I was sitting in the living room with my mother. I felt neither joy nor triumph, Only a strange calm reigned in my heart. A stormy chapter of my life had finally ended. All the resentment and hatred seemed to have been washed away by the rain that night. The following months were a time of legal proceedings. The Innovatech case, due to its magnitude and complexity, caused a stir in the business world. With the irrefutable evidence we provided, the prosecution quickly unraveled the entire conspiracy. The trial was public and attracted special media attention. I did not attend. I didn't want to see the faces that had caused me so much harm again. I learned everything through Attorney Caldwell's calls and the news. In court, faced with the obvious evidence, Marcus completely broke down. He confessed to all his crimes, helping his mother divert funds, creating fake debts, and planning the theft of my assets after the divorce. Crying, he blamed everything on his mother's instigation and pressure, begging for clemency. The image of the confident, arrogant president had disappeared. Only a weak, miserable prisoner remained. In contrast, Ms. Holloway stood firm until the end. She denied the charges, claiming she was the victim of a conspiracy, that the recordings were manipulated, and the accounting records were falsified. She continued to play the role of the innocent victim until the prosecution presented the recording of her call threatening my mother. Hearing her own voice, arrogant and threatening, resonating in the solemn courtroom, she finally broke down and silently bowed her head. The final verdict was for the crimes of fraud, embezzlement, and tax evasion. Ms. Holloway, as the main perpetrator, was sentenced to 20 years in prison. Marcus, considering his confession and repentance, was sentenced as an accomplice to 15 years. The other parties involved also received their corresponding punishments. Innovatech, my spiritual child that I once nurtured with all my heart, now tainted by debt and corruption, was finally declared bankrupt. Justice had been served, but in my heart there was no victor's joy, only a melancholic sadness for a beautiful first love that ended in tragedy and for the years of youth lost to a deception. A week after the trial ended, I decided to do something I had been thinking about for a while. I drove to the quiet rural town where Elijah's family was temporarily staying. I wanted to express my sincere gratitude to my loyal assistant, who had sacrificed so much for me. Elijah's small house was nestled among green fields. The air was pure and peaceful, in contrast to the suffocating atmosphere of the city. Elijah, his wife, and their children came out to greet me at the entrance of the town with a warm welcome. Their smiles were simple and affectionate. Elijah's injuries had completely healed, and he looked much healthier and happier. I brought some gifts and a financial gratuity, but the couple flatly refused to accept them. "Ma'am, please don't do this," Elijah said. "What I did was because I believed in justice and in you. Your victory is the greatest gift for me. Now please, let me go back to work at Synergy Tech. I miss the work very much." We shared a simple but comforting meal. Listening to the couple's laughter and the children's chatter, I felt a deep peace. I realized that after all the storms, what matters is not money or success, but human affection, loyalty, and kindness. This trip cleansed the last vestiges of bitterness from my heart and prepared me to face a new chapter in my life. 1 year has passed, 1 year since that stormy night when Marcus and his mother disappeared amid the police sirens, and I, sitting by the window at my mother's house, sighed as if a weight had been lifted. Time has healed many things, but it hasn't erased the scars. And from those scars, I have learned to be reborn. My life did not stop at the pain or end with the betrayal. I chose another path. With my own hands and my mind, I built my own business. Synergy Tech, the small company we started in a modest office with Elijah and a few young engineers, is now a shining name in the tech sector. In the beginning, we spent nights programming on instant ramen. When we won our first contract, we hugged and screamed with joy. We made countless presentations to investors to secure funding, and sometimes we were disheartened by cold rejections, but we didn't give up. The climax came at the Entrepreneur of the Year Awards Gala. Under the bright lights on a grand stage, I stood firm in my white suit and received a crystal trophy from the hands of a government official. A thunderous ovation erupted, but this time it was different. I was no longer Marcus's shadow, nor was I next to a man to be called the president's wife. I was Alexa Thornton, an entrepreneur in my own right, a woman who had risen above everything. The press rushed to publish articles calling me the icon of the American tech sector's rebirth. But what moved me most were not those headlines. It was Elijah's gaze from the audience, shining with pride, and the warm smile of an old friend who had quietly accompanied me from a little further away. Another turning point came when the court ordered the liquidation of Innovatech's assets to pay its debts. At the public auction, I sat in the front row. My former competitor was now just a ruined name. When the original patent for the management system I had conceived went up for auction, I raised my paddle without hesitation. The room filled with murmurs. Finally, for a reasonable price, I bought it all back. The moment the title of ownership was in my hands, I closed my eyes in silence. The circle had closed. Innovatech, where I was betrayed and humiliated, was officially part of the past, and the product of my mind had returned to its creator's hands. I felt neither triumph nor arrogance, only a profound peace. An old door had closed, and a new one was opening wide. One summer evening, while visiting a friend in a hospital maternity ward, I unexpectedly ran into Chelsea. She was sitting in a hallway, cradling a chubby baby. She no longer wore designer clothes. She wore a loose shirt and looked simple. Her face was tired, but the look she gave her son was infinitely tender. Chelsea looked up and froze when she saw me. There was no arrogance or defiance in her gaze now, only a wounded, lonely young mother. "Alexa," Chelsea said in a trembling whisper. I looked at the child in her arms. He was sleeping peacefully, moving his lips as if dreaming. In that instant, all the hatred I held vanished. I understood that this child was not to blame for anything. He didn't choose his parents, nor did he know anything about the dirty conspiracies of the past. "Are you doing all right?" I asked. Chelsea lowered her head, and tears began to fall. "I'm so sorry, Alexa. It's too late for everything. I just want to raise this child well. Can you ever forgive me?" I sighed. The forgiveness was not for her, but for myself. Continuing to cling to hatred would only harm me. "The past is the past, Chelsea. Take good care of your son. He needs a mother who knows how to live rightly." Chelsea hugged her son and broke down in tears. I nodded slightly as a farewell and continued on my way. I felt light as a feather. Another afternoon, Devin and I were strolling along the ocean in the Outer Banks, North Carolina. The reddish sun was slowly setting on the horizon, and the waves gently washed the shore. I took off my shoes and felt the cool water on my bare feet. Devin walked beside me in silence, but his mere presence conveyed peace. "Alexa," Devin said softly, "you've lived too long for others. Now live for yourself. And if you ever want someone to accompany you, I would like it to be me." I turned toward Devin. His eyes were kind and firm. Instead of answering, I smiled. I wasn't ready to start a new love yet, but I knew I had a friend, a life partner, a calm shoulder to lean on. We walked together along the long, sandy beach, leaving 2 pairs of footprints in our wake. Before me stretched the vast sea and a sky tinged red by the sunrise that announced a new day in my life. I took a deep breath. An intense faith sprang up in my chest. Because even if a woman loses everything, if she keeps her dignity, her wisdom, and her courage, she can always be reborn and find happiness. Did you like my story, and which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you like the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story with love and respect.